All right. Well, thanks again, Anne. Thanks again, Carolyn, for your time today as we demonstrate our CapsimInbox platform for consideration for the 2020 SIIA CODiE Awards, in particular for the Best Cross-Curricular Solution category. And just what I thought I'd do to get us started here would just to kind of show you an agenda of what we'll be focusing on today. I figured we'd start with a quick introduction to CapsimInbox, so actually showing you what it looks like right here at the beginning. That way it kind of sets the context for the rest of the call. And then after that, what we can do is we can talk a little bit about us here at Capsim, a little bit about our history with micro-simulations in the past. And then from there, we'll kind of jump into, why exactly did we build CapsimInbox? What was the need we were trying to assess? And more importantly, how did we actually go about creating it? And then after that, the majority of the presentation will be spent on us going through an actual platform demonstration. So looking at the entire student experience from start to finish. And then since I looked a little bit into your backgrounds with both having content management as well as instructional design experience, I thought I'd kind of briefly walk you through the authoring process. Because over the course of 2019 alone, I personally worked with about 12 different authors to create different versions of Inbox, particularly at the higher education level. And then I would wrap that up by giving you kind of insight into the future of CapsimInbox. What are we currently working on to make this tool more widespread for different cross-curricular solutions outside of our mainstay in the College of Business? And then as a final wrap-up, I figured I'd actually relate how CapsimInbox correlates with each of the different criteria in the cross-curricular solution category. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Awesome. Excellent. So let's just start with a brief introduction to CapsimInbox. What exactly is it, and what are the main components of it? So just to start out, CapsimInbox is essentially one of the world's first simulation-based skill assessment solutions that's particularly designed to assess and develop these kind of key soft skills as well as hard skills. That's really indicated by the research in a lot of our corporate clients as being the most critical when it comes to development at the academic level in students, as well as what they're looking for in terms of new hires and what they wish they could develop with their existing employees. And basically, CapsimInbox is a fully self-directed, web-based solution. So students simply log on at capsim.com and have immediate access to a thorough onboarding process, micro-simulation, and then an entire feedback section. And really, this brings us to three main components. The first part is the onboarding, where we actually have the student do a quick self-assessment on skills such as, say we're talking about soft skills like problem-solving, leadership, or communicative abilities, or even more hard-skill practical task questions. Like some of our versions, for example, like microeconomics, we may be looking at, can you jot out a supply curve? Or can you actually interpret financial reports, for example? And what we do in the onboarding, in addition to the self-assessment, is we kind of brief the student on what's the scenario they're going to encounter before they go into the Inbox simulation. And basically what this simulation entails is that we wanted to put the students in a day in the life of a manager at a company and have them to respond to a variety of different emails from supervisors, subordinates, clients, vendors, you name it, and really see how they would react in real time to different situations. How would they respond if they were in the driver's seat? And a good way to think about this is almost like a digitalized choose-your-own-adventure, where they're going to see those consequences, whether they be positive or negative, in real time, and they're going to eventually get to the point where they have to make a final decision, and then they have to justify why did they make that decision. And this typically takes about 60 minutes on average that we provide them, but in terms of completion time, we're looking at it closer to 35 to 45 minutes. And we've currently seen this tool used at everything from the high school level through the MBA level, graduate level, but also within our corporate trainings as well, which I'll elaborate on a little bit further. But to kind of give you an idea of what does a simulation look like, well, here's a glimpse at it. And as you can see, we tried to really emulate a lot of the Outlooks and Gmails that we use every day. Because virtually all careers out there, the majority anyway, will have some sort of email correspondence, so we want to make sure that we can provide both a high-fidelity experience and a relevant experience to the student. And this is where they'll actually be making those email decisions. And then as far as the third part of Inbox, basically what we have is an individualized feedback report that's going to be created instantaneously as they complete the Inbox simulation. And what we're really looking at here is we want to give the student a snapshot of time as to where their skills are at that given moment. So we can show them their overall performance by percentile against the general populace that's gone through that version of Inbox. And then more importantly, we can actually visualize both self-awareness levels and skill gaps. That way we give the students the tools they need to improve their skills going forward. And we'll go into this a lot more in depth during the platform demonstration, but just figure to give you a little bit of a glimpse here and now. But now what I'd like to do is just give you a little bit of background on us here at Capsim. So we here at Capsim have been creating simulation technologies for about 35 years at this point. In fact, to this year to the date. We actually started in 1985 creating custom simulations for a lot of larger corporations out there. However, the last 25 years or so, we have also shifted our focus into academia, which I'll go into in just a second. But we're still a fairly small company, only about 50 employees, and it's been a great company to work for. I personally have been there for about 3 years at this point, a little over 3 years, and where my primary role is actually working directly with our contributing authors to create these simulations from scratch. Now, in terms of our reach around the globe academically, we are really a staple in a lot of the strategic management programs at both the undergraduate and the graduate level. But also with CapsimInbox, and how it really relates to cross-curricular solutions is that we wanted to use this platform to create different micro-simulations that could span the entire business curriculum. So everything from your core courses like strategic management, like financial management, but also into elective areas as well. Things like microeconomics that may be a prerequisite, cultural awareness, operations management, just to name a few. And at any given point in time, we're in about 1,100 universities around the globe, and our in-house support staff is helping out about 3,000 professors and about 140,000 students at any given point in time. And then on the corporate side, I mentioned that we did have our beginnings on the corporate side of things. We continue that to this day. In fact, we're constantly doing 1 to 3 day on-site or virtually facilitated professional development programs that focus on everything from, how do we teach basic business terminology, to trying to reduce silos, or maybe even try to demonstrate the importance of cross-functional decision-making. But more recently, too, help around succession planning, as well as identifying high-potential employees to move up the ladder. And this is kind of a good segue into why and how did we build CapsimInbox, because a lot of it was from us keeping our ear to the ground at those corporate trainings. So as you can imagine, we're constantly asking the training and development specialists, what are really the key skills that you're actively looking for in new applicants coming out of academia, but also skills that you wish could be improved upon with your existing employees. And what we found was there was really one key area. It was soft skills, soft skills, soft skills. And I'm sure that the both of you may be able to relate. We're kind of in this critical moment right now where a lot of students are really lacking these kind of core skills, whether it be something as basic as communicating or something, around leadership capabilities. Would you both agree?
Yes.
Excellent, excellent. So what we wanted to do as we were kind of starting to create this CapsimInbox platform, excuse me, in the middle of 2017, was we wanted to look at both research from the academic side and the corporate side. In regards to the corporate side, one of the big things we looked at was the Bloomberg Job Skills Report of 2016, where they looked at over 1,200 different recruiters at different companies, about 550 companies in total. And they asked them, what are the key skills? What are the most desired, least common skills you're finding in applicants? And they really said that it was leading, problem solving, and communicating. Now, to flip that on the academic side, what we wanted to do was we looked at the Graduate Management Admission Council, the GMAC survey, that looked at about 6,100 MBA alumni after they had just, of course, completed their program. And they said if there was any one area that you felt that you could use more management education, where would it be? And about 85% of them identified that primary need as being the ability to manage human capital. So again, communication, leadership, but also just general collaboration as well as teamwork. So this was kind of the core of our initial research. But we also did look at other studies. We looked at a survey through the National Association of College and Employers, as well as LinkedIn does an excellent workplace reports. In particular, this year, the main focus was trying to identify skill gaps in corporations. So we wanted to look at those as well. And all of these kind of pointed us in the same way around soft skills. And in addition to that, we found that, what's the cost of not developing these up front? Well, we're finding that the lack of certain soft skill capabilities can really be an obstacle when it comes to long-term career success, whether it be something as simple as being able to have adequate interpersonal relationships, maybe failing to meet your business objectives, or leading to being too functionally or too technically oriented. So with all this research gathering, we started to think, okay, what do we need to really focus on? What key areas do we need to assess when we're creating this type of tool? So to give you a little bit of an insight into kind of the developmental philosophy of Inbox, we worked with both professors at DePaul University here in Chicago, as well as industrial organizational psychologists, to really boil it down to 4 main criteria that are absolutely necessary to promote meaningful development when it comes to soft skills. And basically what we found was that first and foremost, we needed to create an assessment that would assess both knowing and doing. So giving practical applications of skills, that way we could see where our students at any given point in time. After that, we wanted to make sure that we could foster accurate self-awareness. So not just giving self-reported data, but also objective information by comparing students' self-assessment in our simulation, but also to the general population. The third thing we really wanted to focus on was to be able to deliver an engaging and a relevant experience. And this is where the email simulation really comes into play, because it's very high fidelity, easy to kind of get lost in it because it's something most of us use on a day-to-day basis. And it's certainly career-related and experiential because, everybody's going to have to learn kind of the basic digital correspondence etiquette, essentially. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, we really wanted to make sure that we could provide actionable feedback both to the organization as well as the end user, whether it be a student or whether it be somebody in a professional development program. So giving them specific developmental feedback, whether it's developmental tactics provided by the author, that can essentially assist them with creating the action items, actionable goals, that way they can improve this going forward. But before I go into a walk through the student experience, do we have any questions so far?
I'm good.
I'm good too, thank you.
Excellent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and jump out of the slideshow really quick, and I'm going to go ahead and kind of walk you through everything start to finish at the student experience. This is something that we provided within the judge resources, but I thought I would provide a little bit more context to it as well. So again, as I stated, basically each student would be provided with an individual login, and they just go to capsim.com and enter their accounts. There's no downloads or supplemental software, anything like that. And the first thing that they'll see is, like you see here, is their student dashboard. So they'll see what is their actual assessments they have, when is the start and end date, and then after they take the assessment, they'll have immediate access to that feedback report, as well as the option to create an individual development plan. So let's just go ahead and get started by taking a look at the assessment itself. So what we have here is the first portion of Inbox, the onboarding process. And what we start with here is a quick welcome video, pretty much just saying, what is CapsimInbox? What will they be experiencing in this micro simulation? What skills are we going to assess? And most importantly, why are they important to their day-to-day careers? And then from there is when they do the self-assessment. So we ask them, relative to your peers, where do you place yourself on the following skills? And for the purpose of today's demonstration, we're going to be looking at CapsimInbox General Management, our first iteration, which focused on those pure soft skills we were describing earlier. So what they'll do is they'll go ahead and rate themselves. So they may say, I've got a little bit of improvement I need on organizing, maybe I'm about average on leading, and maybe I'm actually pretty good at being able to initiate solutions in my organization. And then again, we'll of course compare this to the results of the simulation. After that, we kind of set the scene. What's the story? Well, we tell the individual what is their role at the company, the faux company they're working for, who reports to them, who do they report to, how long have they been there, so just kind of general setting the scene. And then beneath that, we give them a simple company one-pager. Talks about the company's mission and vision, what products and services do they sell, or any primary clients or vendors that they're going to be interacting with, or departments throughout the course of the simulation. And then a really important thing to note here is that, by no means do the students have to do a lot of research into any type of company or industry. This is really more so just about, again, setting that scene for them. They'll go into the practical application, and we're going to be more so looking at how do they respond to the different stimuli in the micro simulation itself. After that, we have a brief technical tutorial that just kind of walks them through how do they actually respond to emails within the simulation. And then we come to the completion of the onboarding. Basically, you're just returning from an extended holiday weekend. You've just been inundated with a bunch of emails, and you've got to make sure you respond to them within a certain amount of time. So after they click that green inbox button, that's when the actual timed assessment starts. So let's go ahead and try it. So as you can see here, we're back to taking a look at the user interface of CapsimInbox. And again, trying to mimic a lot of the typical email platforms out there. But let's take a look at the user interface components. So the first thing at the top here you'll see is that we have a timer. Typically, these are 60-minute assessments with an average completion time around 45 minutes, and they can actually hide that if they'd like to. And then down here on the left, they'll be able to see their inbox with the series of emails they have to respond to, typically about 20 or 30 or so within an hour's time. They can look at their sent items if they want to see how they respond to previous emails. And then below that, we actually have a company drive, just like the OneDrives and the Google Drives we use day to day. And here's where we can provide essentially any sort of media or documentation. Now, what are kind of the staples of this? We, of course, want to have an organizational chart. That way the student can see where are they at within the organization in relation to other people they'll be interacting with. But we also include the company one-pager as well. And then in addition to that, any sort of media like PowerPoints, Excel sheets, videos, anything like that, hyperlinks to external articles, all of that can be put in the drive as well. And typically this is used for students to be able to do a little bit of research. That way they can make a well-informed decision within one of the emails, for example. But now let's take a look at the actual emails themselves. So here we've got an email from one of our colleagues, and we've got several nuanced responses down here at the bottom that are multiple choice. And to give you an idea of how does the actual assessment work, well, for each of these multiple choice responses, they're going to have different varying levels of effectiveness on how they respond. So to give you an example, maybe response 1 is by far the most effective response. We'll give them 10 points towards problem solving. Maybe response 2 is effective, but not so as much, maybe worth 5 points. Maybe the third response is kind of not really moving the ball forward at all. It doesn't really contribute to the conversation, 0 points. Or maybe the student makes a detrimental decision that kind of leads us down the wrong pathway. We can do -5, for example. And we can assign multiple skills to multiple responses. And that's pretty much how the assessment works on the backside of things. Now, in addition to emails, what we also have is some instant messages that pop up as well. And the main reason we did this is we want to make sure that we could differentiate the stimuli just a little bit. That way it's not all just emails. And then after they've completed all of the emails within the micro-simulation, they'll actually be prompted saying you've completed the inbox assessment, and now we're ready to take a look at your feedback report. But before we go there, is there any questions about anything of the onboarding or of the actual simulation itself?
I'm good. I don't have any questions.
Okay. Sounds good. So now, as I noted, they're going to go right into that individualized feedback report. And when I say instantaneous, it really is much so. I mean, as soon as they exit it, they're going to have access to this. And really, it's 4 main components that we provide feedback on. The first thing is that overall performance by percentile. So actually showing the student's performance at that given point in time for everybody that's gone through that particular version. And that includes the entire sample group, whether they be high schoolers, higher education, corporate, you name it, because very commonly what we see done is that individuals will take this over the course of their academic and corporate career. That way they can see their improvement all the way back to the first time they went through CapsimInbox. But I'll be able to expand upon that a little bit later. Below that, we provide a developmental index. And really what this is showing is how proficient were the responses that the student chose and how consistent were they in that proficiency. Below that, we provide a gauge on a scale of 0 to 6 on their self-awareness level. And really, this is where that self-assessment starts to come in. Because what we really want to show here is that, are you kind of overestimating or underestimating your abilities? Because there can be, pros and cons to each of those, to be honest. And then most importantly, at the bottom here, we actually visualize where did they rate themselves on the self-assessment? Where did they place themselves in the inbox assessment based on their performance? That way we can not only visualize the skill gaps, but being able to identify which particular areas are in most need of improvement. And in this scenario, we're looking at potentially organizing, initiating, and leading in this case. And when we take a look at the instructor side, you'll be able to see that they're going to see a course roster of all this for each student as well. But we give the students this feedback, but what do they actually do with it? Well, what we wanted to do was be able to create an individual development plan builder, where we're going to provide a couple of different resources for them to create those actionable goals. So to start, they're going to be able to see a video from the author of the simulation, kind of describing to them what was their thought process for creating this, and what do they hope the student can achieve based on the developmental tactics that they provide. Now, what exactly is included within those developmental tactics? We're going to be looking at, basic, tips and tricks on from the author on how students can improve these skills in both an academic and a corporate setting. These can include additional, supplemental readings or supplemental resources. They can provide, additional questions or essay questions to consider, or discussion topics for in-class discussion as well. But basically, the way that it works here is that they'll see their different skills, their scores, the level of developmental need, in this case, organizing is a key area we want to look at, and then they're able to create an action plan for each particular skill. So the way that it works is, say we want to improve our recognizing issues skill. Well, first thing we ask is them to reflect 2 or 3 reasons why it's important to your current or future career, and 2 or 3 situations that you might actually practically use this skill. After they do that, they'll go ahead and create a goal statement. So I want to increase my proficiency at this skill by this percentage, by this date, and I plan on reevaluating my progress again by going through CapsimInbox. And then after that, they create the tangible items of their plan. What exact steps, activities, what are they going to do to improve these skills? Exactly when are they going to do it? And what resources are going to be necessary for them to be able to do that? And what they'll do is basically create this plan. They'll go into Inbox later, and then we're able to provide essentially pre- and post-test data that will show their empirical longitudinal development over time. But this kind of encapsulates the student experience. What I thought I'd do now is just briefly show you what do things look like on the instructor side of things. So as you can see, again, trying to keep the user interface as friendly as possible, but also we wanted to try to make CapsimInbox have as little administrative burden as possible. And really, we can make this as simple as providing a hyperlink to students, whether it be integrated into a syllabus or just sent via email, where students can quickly register and then go through that self-directed onboarding process, go through the simulation, get their feedback report, and essentially the instructor can kind of just sit back and watch as the results come in. Of course, we do provide professor resources on discussion debriefs, so that way they can translate the results to students after the fact in group discussion or with essay questions and so on. But in terms of what will they see on their dashboard, they're going to see the overall performance of that cohort by percentile, what was the average skill score of the ones being assessed, and then down here they're going to see their course roster with each student's name, their overall score and self-awareness score, when did they complete the Inbox assessment, how long did it take them, and if and when did they complete an individual development plan. Because very often what we've seen at the higher education level is that, and at the high school level as well, is that instructors will kind of use the thoroughness of the students' efforts in the IDP for assessment. Basically how active were they in their own professional development at that point. And then if we want to get a little bit more granular as well, we can also show them each individual skill being assessed for all the students that participated. Any questions about the walkthrough?
No, I'm good.
Okay, excellent. So what I'll do now is I'm going to go ahead and jump back into the PowerPoint deck. Let me go ahead and switch it back here to presenter view. And basically what I can describe now is that, because of this CapsimInbox platform, we've been able to create a variety of different versions with those authors that I was referring to earlier. And as I mentioned, over the course of 2019, one of our primary focus was making sure we had different micro-simulation solutions for every facet of the business curriculum. However, we're currently working with a lot of other universities as well as corporations to create custom simulations just for them and branching outside of the School of Business. To give you 2 quick examples, one, we're working with a very large university here in the city of Chicago around creating a School of Public Health version. But also within the corporate sphere, we're working with one of the largest insurance companies to essentially create an Inbox version around how do you run a local office if you're an independent contractor. So actually doing your own promotions, connecting with the larger corporate entity, that sort of thing. And in fact, we've done a couple of in-house versions like general management, people management, and most recently time management that have a lot of practical applications regardless of if it's business related or not. And in fact, our time management version was recently featured in an article of Harvard Business Review. And when I provide you this deck after the call, I've included the link down there at the bottom as well. Now, in terms of how do we actually see this utilized in the classroom? Well, I would say that there's kind of three primary use cases. The first would be, kind of as a general exercise, just kind of something fun and experiential to kind of let the students complete as a homework assignment or in class. I would say more commonly we see this used in the latter two different areas. The first would be as kind of essentially a live case study, so trying to increase the participant engagement and drive in-class discussion around these scenarios that relate directly to a given course. But then also from the organization or the institution level as an assessment tool to actually capture participant proficiency levels on these career-related skills. That way they can measure development over time for pre- and post-test. And this is very common that we see this used for, assurance of learning standards, for accreditation, benchmarking concerns. I mean, all of that. We're able to provide, cohort-level data, individual data, annually or within a given semester. All of that we can do custom reporting on, while also providing, ambiguous data that doesn't risk any personally identifiable information, of course. Now, as far as what does it actually look like to author custom microsimulations with CapsimInbox? So typically, it's a fairly straightforward process, and this is one of the key areas that works for Inbox because we can pretty much create these in as little as a month and a half. But I would say that the majority of the versions that I just showed, we're looking at about 3 to 4 months in terms of everything from the initial concept form being completed all the way through final testing to release. So a fairly quick turnaround here. And kind of briefly go through that process, we do start with that initial concept form. So we have a simple fillable form that instructional designers or professors can utilize to kind of jot down their initial thoughts. We have a quick call where we talk about those expectations, and then we would move forward into content creation phase. And as you can imagine, this is probably the bulk of the process. Typically takes about a month, month and a half, but really it's at the speed of the author in terms of how do they actually create the email stimuli, of which, of course, we provide both templates and documents for them to catalog all of that. And then after we've created all the content, we go into a subject matter expert review, as well as conduct student pilots. And on the subject matter expert side, of course, we're looking to, relevant experts in the field that can tell us about the relevance and validity of the assessment. And on the student pilot side, we want to garner, of course, student feedback on the experience, but also to build our sample group to increase the validity of the results as well. And then after we complete those pilots and SME reviews, we do a final internal review with our product development team, which leads to a formal release. And depending on if this is more at the organization level, we can do collaborative promotional efforts to make this, available to everybody in the world, or we can just make it as a custom solution for that particular university. But really what's important to note here is that at every step of the way, they work with me personally to actually kind of, work through this entire process. Very commonly, we do bi-weekly review calls where we're actually going through the content, putting it into a live demo link and going through it to make sure does the flow make sense at every step of the process. And in terms of what content actually has to be created, well, there's really not too much. And for all of these, we have templates to kind of get the ball rolling. So the main thing would be the scenario, what kind of company, industry, and what's the participant role. We have the skills that need to be assessed, and we've done this as pure soft skills, hard skills, or a combination of the two. There's, of course, the content itself. We're looking at about 20 to 30 emails on average, I would say. And then, of course, the supplemental resources, being the developmental tactics so that students can improve their skills, as well as the debrief guide. That way the professor can adequately convey the results. And then just on a final note when it comes to authoring, we have a variety of different features. And this list is, ever expanding at any given point in time because we really want to make sure we can not only have all of the aspects of your traditional Outlook-style email platform, but being able to integrate with third-party services, which I'll be able to provide an example of later. But in terms of features, we can do quite a few things at this point in time. There's, of course, the email threading, so lending itself to that digital choose-your-own-adventure where they can go on convergent, divergent paths that either come back together or they go off in completely different tangents. We can do smart threading, where essentially if a student picks an incorrect response, we can let them know that that was incorrect and then loop them back to the previous email and eliminate that incorrect response. The timers, as I said, typically 60-minute experience, but we can remove it entirely or set it for any time that the author would like. In regards to drive files and file attachments, we can essentially attach any type of media at this point in time. As far as question groups go, we can do randomized groups. That way we can essentially make sure two different students have different experiences, essentially like parallel items. And one of our more recent updates was actually around sectioning. So what if an instructor does not want it to be just a single 60-minute experience? Well, what we can do now is we can make modules that essentially could be alongside a textbook or alongside a curriculum. That way they're shorter abridged experiences. So maybe 4 15-minute experiences or 6 10-minute experiences. Again, all up to the author. Additionally, we can do priority and time bonuses. Say, for instance, you may want to respond to the CEO before you respond to one of your subordinates, for example. And then also we have a different variety of response options. So we covered, your typical select one multiple choice, but we can also do selecting multiple answers. Say 3 out of the 5 are correct. But most intriguing is that we can actually put in written responses. And to give you an example of this, what we could do is that, say the student goes through 3 or 4 emails, they learn about the crisis going on, and then they select the response. Well, at the end of that email chain, we can have their supervisor reach out and say, hey, I understand you did X, Y, Z for this particular issue. I'd love for you to be able to tell me what was your rationale for making that decision. And then what we do is we have full text capabilities where the student can type out a response to see what was their justification, what was their mindset for making that decision. And the way that it works on the professor side or the instructor side is that they'll still have the empirical assessment from the comparison to the general populace, but they can add an additional score based on the thoroughness of their response in the written response as well. Any questions about the authoring process or any features?
No, this is nice.
Yeah, I agree.
Excellent. Thank you. Now, with both of your background kind of being in content management as well as instructional design, I thought you both get a kick out of where we're taking Inbox into the future. I kind of spoke primarily today on our 2019 efforts working directly, very collaboratively with these authors, but we also get a lot of requests from instructional designers in academia and corporate that already know how to use tools like this. Maybe they are used to using things like Storyline 360 or Adobe Captivate, and they're looking for something differentiated to create a brand new solution. So what we're actually working on right now, and we're going to be completing by the end of May, is a CapsimInbox authoring platform, essentially a software as a service. So just like the other software as a services out there, we wanted to try to model this not too different from the kind of PowerPoint we're going through today, where you could essentially flip back and forth from an editing, content creation aspect directly to jumping into what would that look like to preview the experience from the participant perspective. So this is just a quick look on the interface I can take you around. So you can actually create stimuli, whether it be an email, an instant message, or maybe you want to sort it by a group. Say, for instance, here we're looking at the example of our business law CapsimInbox. Maybe we want to make a chain of emails on discrimination or on safety compliancy or OSHA standards to go a little bit further. They can actually sort them just like that. They'll also have an outline view that essentially, think of it like mind mapping, a visual representation of how these emails are interacting within a virtual space. We'll have an address book where they can create their contacts. That way it's a simple drop-down menu so they can say, who's this email coming from? What's their position? They'll have the drive file to input those supplemental documents, and then they'll have that preview experience button to jump in to see what it looks like from the other side. And then to dive a little bit further into it, to show you what would it actually look like writing something, well, here at the top, you'd be able to enter your subject line. You would be able to select your contact. So in this case, we're looking at Taylor Burtnick, the Assistant Director of Human Resources. You can add any attachments to the file. Of course, you have full text capabilities here to write the email itself. And then down at the bottom here, you can add the individual responses that the participant can choose from. And as you select or hover over one of these responses, you'll see a little control panel open up here on the side. And what we can do is we can put in triggers for that response. Maybe this is coming from a student's response to a previous email, Or maybe we want to have a time delay. Maybe this email pops up 5 minutes into the experience or 20 seconds into the experience. We can do that. And then there's, of course, the scoring component. So say for this second response here, we're going to make this assigned to the skill of issue identification. And if they select that, they're going to get a positive value of 0.5 towards that skill. And again, it can be positive or negative. And then based on a lot of the feedback we got from our authors in 2019, they're like, I would love a way to be able to give the participant immediate feedback just as they click that incorrect response. So what we can do now is actually do that. And not only can we give it during the simulation itself, but if they select incorrect responses, when it comes to the feedback report after the assessment, we can provide a list of all of the feedback that they were garnering as they went through the microsim experience, essentially. So. And as I said, we're currently creating this now. We're hoping for a release of this in beta around April 15th and a formal release to everybody around May 15th. And then just to give you a little bit more insight in the future, we're actually continuing to work with a variety of authors across the country on more business-relevant versions, but also some attributed indirectly to business as well. So things like strategic management, finance management, business communications being more in the College of Business, but also some more indirect aspects like data analytics, healthcare administration, event management, sales or return-driven strategy, or social media marketing, to name a few. And then just in closing, as we get to the end of the presentation, I thought I would go ahead and relate how Inbox actually goes with the different criteria of the best cross-curricular solution category. So starting out, let's take a look at platform flexibility. Is this solution optimized for various platforms? And does it deliver various types of content? And there's going to be a little bit of overlap here with integration as well. But in terms of the platform, absolutely. We're talking, desktop access is by far the most common way that students go about this. A lot of one-to-one classrooms, for example. But we also have full functionality on tablets, too. But one thing we're currently working on at this time is the mobile access portion of it. I'm sure you both can understand that, there's a lot of differences between your Outlook app on your phone as opposed to online and everything, but this is something we're actually working at to make it that much more user-friendly. In terms of integration, does it provide a lot of straightforward methods to integrate curriculum content, third-party content, and so on? Well, absolutely. Because it's an email experience, it's relevant to, essentially virtually any area out there outside the College of Business. But in terms of actual functionality, I mentioned we can put hyperlinks in there in terms of news articles to relate it to real-world events, any type of media as a file attachment or in the drive. And to give you an example of a third-party service, in the data analytics version we're working on, essentially this one is about forensic accounting, and they're in Inbox asking for different documents to try to investigate fraud of the company. And what they do is after they've got all the documentation, they jump into Tableau, this kind of third-party data source. They do a quick data analysis, and then they go back into Inbox to be able to connect with their supervisor as to who committed fraud, if at all, essentially. And then really here it's, the ease of use, in terms of actually implementing this in the curriculum. Again, it's as easy as a hyperlink provided to students to go and have immediate access, and really we wanted to limit that administrative burden as much as possible. Now, as far as the feature set, it's fairly easy for meeting the needs of users because, we're giving them a familiar interface that everybody has some level of exposure to. And this is in addition to the full text editing and scoring capabilities we have, that ever-expanding list of features we had talked about, and then, of course, the templates themselves that we have. We've created templates around, business, finance, healthcare, government agencies. Basically, all of the core areas in business if you wanted to try to get kind of a jump start into creating a version. Now, in terms of reports, is the system going to produce these useful reports for the organization, but also with the user? So with reports here, I'll focus more on the organization side, and then when it comes to feedback, I can focus more on the student side. But really, from the organizational level, it's really important because we're assessing both the knowing and the doing. We're kind of bridging that gap between theory and practice by putting the student right in the scenario. And then we talked a little bit about the pre- and post-test applications, being able to see that empirical longitudinal development over time. But also, there's the benefits of the data provided to the institution to be able to improve their own programs. So just as we're identifying skill gaps in the student, we can identify the key areas, strengths and weaknesses of any curriculum at that point in time. You know, maybe we're doing a great job at, say, you know, teaching the students financial analysis, but maybe we're not doing as good of a job in terms of, you know, walking them through a decision-making process, how to adequately make a decision, to give you an idea there. And again, the various levels of data could be everything from the individual level all the way to the organization or cohort level as well. Moving on to feedback. Well, as far as the student or participant side of things, you know, we're giving them that instant individualized feedback report. And really what we're trying to do here is foster that accurate self-awareness. That way they're not under or overconfident in their abilities. And then identify skill gaps. That way they can improve going forward. And with that actionable feedback, they can take the steps to improve their own, pretty much take the reins of their own development by having access to that individual development plan builder. Now, in terms of assessment, you know, what extent are they useful and functional to the user? Well, they're really useful because, again, we're kind of providing that snapshot in time. Where are they at this given moment? And we can kind of see how that progresses over the course of their career. And again, too, we're kind of providing real-world context to learning, identifying strengths and weaknesses, and most importantly, helping them set goals and evaluate progress over time. In terms of customization, you know, really the sky's the limit, honestly. You know, we're seeing this used in so many different areas. We had talked about, you know, as a quick assessment or a case study, but I'm also working with some of our authors of textbooks to essentially create mini simulation modules that go right alongside the chapters of their book. We're also talking with a lot of HR companies and training and development specialists in the corporate sphere to use this as a tool for whether it's your standard professional development training or as part of a screening process or an onboarding process too. And everything from the scenario, roles, skills, everything can be changed, as well as the reporting and feedback. You know, if we don't want to focus on soft skills, we can focus on hard skills, or we can do a combination of the two. And then finally, in closing, you know, what does this look like from an instructional design perspective and in terms of innovation? Because there's quite a bit of overlap here. Really, the big thing is that we're really bridging that gap with essentially providing live case studies. And we really do have that research-based approach, you know, not just from the research on the corporate and academic side of things that we talked about at the beginning of the call, but also with our work with industrial organizational psychologists to figure out what are the most important components of this type of assessment tool. And with that, we, of course, want to provide reliable and empirical data on student development. But what about the validity? Well, one thing you may have seen within the judge portal, and I can provide it as an attachment as well, is that we've already done some research out there to show the effectiveness, the correlation between inbox performance and real-world performance. So what we did was we looked at our 3 initial versions: general management, people management, and ethical decision-making. And what we did was we took a group of MBA students from DePaul University that went through the assessment, and then we were able to get their personal feedback reports from their supervisors. And what we found is there's actually a very strong content and criterion-related validity when it comes to a correlation between their performance in the micro-simulation and actual on-the-job performance. And I'll go ahead and highlight those areas in the email response to this as well. So with that, that's pretty much our close. You know, I do appreciate both of your time when it comes to looking at CapsimInbox today for consideration for the CODiEs. And I'll be uploading this video not just via email to you, but also on the go.capsim.com/CODiE page, where you can see some additional resources we've included there as well. And as a final close, if there's any particular versions of CapsimInbox that we reviewed today, and I'll go ahead and bring up the list here. There's a few currently released versions at the top here. If you'd like to have access to any of these to try it yourself, I'd be more than happy to give you access. So any thoughts?
Thank you, Matt. This is an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't mind me asking, with both of your you know, experience in the field, have you seen any sort of tools like this in the past, or anything with this kind of level of fidelity?
I haven't with the business. No, I haven't at all.
No, I have not come across this either, or with a relatable tool such as Adobe or so.
Okay, excellent. Well, would either of you like to try any of the versions that we're describing today? If I could offer a suggestion, if you wanted to take a look at, say, general management, time management, or ethics, those might be a good representation to kind of show you.
I would like
Yes.
The ethical decision-making would be one I would enjoy. And the cultural, oh, you don't have the cultural awareness yet, do you?
No, actually we do. I can provide you that as well. That was created by one of our authors. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, I would like to try the general management. It sounds kind of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just so I make sure, Carolyn, you were requesting the EDM, the ethical decision-making and cultural awareness, and then Anne, you were requesting GM, correct? Or did I have that backwards?
No, that's correct for me, and I think that's what I heard her say. I'll tell you what, though, don't send me business law. Man, oh man, that I couldn't do that one.
Yeah, that's actually,
that's the worst.
you know, just
That's the worst class I had in school. Of any classes I've ever had in my life, that was the worst class I ever had. It was so hard for me.
Yeah, that one's pretty interesting. You know, as you can imagine with some of these, they can be kind of polarizing sometimes, you know, because especially with something like law, you know, there's open to a lot of different interpretations. So that was one of our first ones where we really wanted to bulk up more on the discussion-based topics towards the end because it can be so different in different courses. But
well, it may
one,
sorry? I said, well, that may be something I could learn from. I don't know, but yeah, it's just I just had a bad taste in my mouth for that one. That was a tough one, tough topic for me.
I gotcha. Well, to give you a little bit more insight in how I've actually, you know, utilized the tool, you'll see there we did an escape room, and you're probably wondering how do you do a virtual escape room, right? So what I did was me and a colleague at Capsim actually authored this, and what we did was that via this simulation platform, we were able to find a way to go about multiplayer, where rather than being in a physical room, you are set in a scenario where you are essentially at a headphones company and your boss just got back from a conference that says every single one of our competitors has a product they're going to be debuting at this conference. We have nothing. Well, I've got an hour open left to submit a concept. That way we can present it. And I want you to work with different departments within the company to be able to create this new product. And you have to have no experience when it comes to business. All of the actual puzzles themselves are actually things like, you know, Sudoku and word searches and process of elimination, but set with a business narrative, if that makes sense. And your whole goal is to be able to name your product by the end of the timer running out.
Can you add me to that one too?
Yes, that was for Carolyn?
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, 100%. And that'll come with some
I
additional
saw that
documentation.
one, but
Yeah. Yeah, but what I'll go ahead and do is, you know, I'll just, you know, for these, I'll just create these accounts for both of you. That way, if, you know, you'd like to try either one, you'll have that opportunity. But again, too, if you have any other questions, feel free to let me know. I'd be happy to jump on another call or give you access to any of the other versions as well, okay?
Right on, Matt. Thank you so much
for your time.
Thank you both as well. And then I should have that email out to you all shortly.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day and have a great weekend.
Thanks,
you too. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.